Hi, and welcome back to Outside View Scandals, where we dive into the messiest and most questionable moments in political history, for example. And today we're going to look at something that perfectly combines two of our favorite things, money and political corruption. Yes, I'm talking about the cash for questions scandal, also known as the time some British politicians got a little too comfortable putting a price tag on democracy. Let's set the scene, the 1990s. The UK was under the leadership of John Major and his Conservative Party. Things seemed pretty calm, well, as calm as politics ever get. But just like in any good soap opera, there was a subplot of scandal simmering below the surface. And what did we find bubbling up? Politicians allegedly being paid to ask questions in Parliament on behalf of, wait for it, private companies. Because why let public service get in the way of good payday, right? But let's rewind a bit. In the early 90s, lobbying in the UK was booming. Companies were keen to influence government policy, and MPs, that's members of parliament, apparently decided that asking questions in the House of Commons was a great way to help their friends in business. And hey, if they could earn a little extra cash while doing their public duty, who could blame them? Spoiler alert, everyone. The scandal broke in October 1994 when The Guardian newspaper, because of course it was The Guardian, ran an explosive story. They claimed that two Conservative MPs, Neil Hamilton and Tim Smith, had been paid by Mohammed Al-Fayed, the owner of Harrods, to ask favourable questions in Parliament. Al-Fayed, it seemed, had some issues with the Department of Trade and Industry over his business dealings, and apparently he thought throwing some cash at MPs would solve his problems. I mean, why hire lawyers when you can just buy a few questions in Parliament? Now let's be clear, the questions weren't exactly earth-shattering. We're not talking about debates on war or peace. It was more along the lines of, can the minister please confirm that Harrods is a wonderful place to shop? But still, it's the principle that counts, right? And the principle here was simple. Democracy isn't supposed to be up for sale. What followed was a full-blown scandal, or as we like to call it, the British version of a political meltdown. Both Hamilton and Smith denied the allegations, naturally. After all, who would admit to renting out their political influence for some quick cash? But the story got only worse for them. As more investigations unfolded, it turned out that other MPs were involved too. Apparently, a lobbying company called Ian Greer Associates was at the heart of this little operation, helping to arrange payments from businesses to politicians. And let's be honest here, it's not like Ian Greer was doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He took a nice little commission for his efforts, and you could say he was just being a smart businessman. Or you could say he was exploiting the political system for profit. But hey, semantics, right? The key figure at the center of all this was Neil Hamilton. Now, Hamilton was known as something of a controversial figure even before this scandal broke. Some might call him a maverick, others might just call him shady. In any case, Hamilton was adamant that he had done nothing wrong. He went on the defensive, claiming it was all a smear campaign, and demanded apologies from pretty much everyone involved. Spoiler alert, he didn't get any. But the thing is, Hamilton wasn't exactly a model of integrity before this. He'd already been involved in earlier scandals, including allegations that he'd accepted free stays at luxury hotels. You know, because when you're a public servant, clearly you deserve a 5-star holiday on someone else's tab. Despite Hamilton's denials, the damage was done. In 1997, he lost his seat in Parliament, defeated by none other than Martin Bell, a former BBC war correspondent who ran as an independent candidate on an anti-corruption platform. Ironic, isn't it? The man who fought against corruption in politics was defeated by the man who stood up against it. And if this were fiction, you'd say it's too on the nose. But alas, sometimes reality really knows how to twist the knife. So what exactly was the fallout from all this? Well, after a series of investigations, it became clear that the problem wasn't just a couple of bad apples, but a whole system that allowed lobbying and financial incentives to blend far too easily with political influence. That's when the Nolan Committee was formed. Named after its chair, Lord Nolan, this committee was tasked with cleaning up British politics, which, considering the circumstances, was a bit like sending someone to clean up after a tornado with just a broom and a dustpan. The committee proposed a set of standards for public life, which included principles like integrity, accountability, and openness, three things that were clearly in short supply during the Cash of Questions for Questions affair. These principles were adopted, but as we all know, setting standards and actually living up to them are two very different things. As for Neil Hamilton, well, he didn't disappear into obscurity like you might expect. No, he kept fighting to clear his name, suing The Guardian for libel, although the case eventually collapsed. He also attempted various political comebacks and became something of a minor celebrity on the British reality TV circuit. Yeah, you heard that right. From Parliament to reality TV. Because nothing says I'm still relevant like being on I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. Hamilton's post-scandal career might be a bit of a joke, but the implications of the Cash for Questions affair were deadly serious. It highlighted just how vulnerable the political system was, and arguably still is, to corruption, lobbying, and the influence of money. The scandal wasn't just about two MPs taking cash for questions. It was a symptom of a much larger issue, the erosion of trust between the public and those who are supposed to represent them. Since then, reforms have been put in place to try and prevent another Cash for Questions incident, but let's not kid ourselves. Lobbying hasn't gone away. Money still talks in politics. It's just that now politicians have to be a bit more careful about how they listen. After all, no one wants to be the next Neil Hamilton. Well, unless there's a lucrative reality TV deal on the table. So, what can we learn from this scandal? Well, maybe it's that democracy isn't as priceless as we'd like to think. Or maybe it's just that British politicians should stick to asking questions that are not paid for by private interests. Either way, the Cash for Questions scandal remains one of the most blatant examples of how political influence can be bought and sold, if the price is right. That's it for today's episode of Outside View Scandals. If you enjoyed this dive into the murky world of political corruption, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you're ever feeling nostalgic for the 1990s, just remember, it wasn't all Britpop and Spice Girls. Sometimes it was cold, hard cash for questions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, where we'll be uncovering even more scandals that rocked the world. And until then, stay skeptical, and the next video is right here in the end screen.